because it's birthday night, we have 3 short 15-minute speakers. And I would like to, and remember, as our speakers are here, keep your phones off and stay seated. You can wait to pee until after the meeting. Did I say it like that? I didn't mean to actually say it like that. What it says here is remember to be polite and stay seated during the speaker. Now, please help me enthusiastically welcome our first speaker, Cole.
Hello everyone, my name is Cole and I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Cole.
Is everyone able to hear me all right?
Oh yeah.
My sobriety date is July 29th, 2021. And grateful to be here, grateful to be speaking at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I remember my first in-person speaker meeting was actually the Friday night speaker meeting at Trinity Lutheran. And I saw these speakers with 20, 30, even 40 years of sobriety. Thought, wow, is that something that I could ever do? Well, I hope so. And so I feel honored to be here to share my experience, strength, and hope with you today. This is my first time speaking, but don't go easy. And so my story starts in Jacksonville, Florida. I grew up with a fairly normal family, mom, dad, younger sister, a lot of pets, but I always felt that I was out of place in some good ways and some bad ways. When it came to the bad ways, or what I considered the bad ways, I was very shy and also very skinny, and so I felt like it made me stand out. And in good ways, as I was very good at school. It came well for me, got A's and B's. It did wonders for my ego because I got to thinking that I could get the same result without putting as much work in. And I come to find out later in life that that wasn't true, that I had to put in the same work as everybody else. And in some cases, I had to put in more work because it didn't come to me very easily. And when it came to drinking, I had my first drunk at 17. Before that, just had sips of beer, wine. But there was one day where my dad had bought a handle of Jack Daniels. And he didn't do that. He wasn't a liquor drinker, but because he was trying it out. And I felt that I wanted to try it out. And so I waited until everyone went to sleep late at night, crept out and got it from the freezer, got some paper cups from the bathroom, started taking shots. And I was so inexperienced that I was using water as my chaser, and it was terrible. So I somehow managed to get down 3 or 4 shots, and I got tired of that, but I was feeling different. I was feeling something that I'd never felt before, and I liked it. And I wanted to go try one of my dad's beers that I didn't like the taste of. But now I enjoyed the taste. It was so good that I went and got another. And by that point, I was quite drunk. And I just remember listening to music on my iPod and dancing in my room, just me in my own little world. And eventually I had to run to the bathroom because I got sick. And I went to bed and woke up for school the next day. And so I kind of did that throughout high school, but not a lot of drinking. I didn't have a lot of opportunity until I got to college. I attended Florida State University, and I felt like I could do whatever I wanted now. It was just me running the show. And so as I continued to go through college, I was drinking more and more. Grades were getting worse and worse. I started setting up my college classes around drinking, where I'd only had class on Monday and Wednesday or Thursday and Tuesday, and so I could drink all the other days of the week until I got to a point where I was drinking every day. And my sophomore year of college, I joined a fraternity. I wanted to be that cool fraternity guy, but eventually I found out that I wanted to drink more, and I ended up moving into the fraternity house my junior year. I thought it was great. I could drink all I wanted and then just go crash up in the room. But I found myself drinking way more than my brothers. And it was embarrassing to me. I didn't like when they showed concern because I didn't think that anything was wrong. And I had a roommate, and I didn't want him to see how much I was drinking. So I'd go and leave and drink somewhere. Oftentimes I'd find myself on the roof of one of the parking garages on campus drinking in my car just so I could be by myself and no one would know. And I spent my senior year in the house as well. This time I had a room to myself. I spent a lot of time drinking in that room by myself too. And I found myself drinking before social events, before tailgates and things like that. And things really started to go awry my senior year because whereas I didn't used to get hangovers in the beginning, now I really got them. And I started to also get the other consequences to where I'd wake up in the morning and feel sick and be unable to eat. I was like, what was happening to me? But I wasn't willing to stop drinking. I wanted to just figure out how to stop the problems I was having. Eventually, I ended up in detox that semester, and I withdrew from the semester. Now, part of the reason I went to detox was just trying to get back on my feet, and I needed some records so that I could submit a withdrawal from the semester without getting financially or academically penalized. But even after that, I ended up returning to school, but I wasn't ready. And my dad even said that he didn't think I was ready, but I went anyway, and as soon as I got back, I was back to drinking. And I ended up going to detox 4 more times before dropping out of college. My parents were supportive enough, they let me move back in with them. And so I lived with them for the next 2 years. But this is now in 2020, and I finally came into Alcoholics Anonymous with the support of my parents and a psychologist, a group in Florida that was on Zoom named the New Freedom Group. I really like that name. And I managed to stay sober for 2 months, but I was hiding from getting a sponsor. I ended up drinking again, and what happened is I saw, whereas if you're not convinced, try some controlled drinking. And so I tried to just have one. And as I was pouring that one drink, before it even touched my lips, I said that one wasn't going to be enough, and I poured another. And so right there, I was already unable to control my drinking. So I came back into the rooms there in Florida, did get a sponsor, a great man who just recently moved from New York, had 26 years at that time. He just recently celebrated 29. And as soon as he came in, he introduced himself and said that he was willing to sponsor. And so that was my first sponsor. We started with the steps. I wasn't willing to get honest. I did a 4-step for the first time, and I left the 2 most important things off. And I ended up drinking again after that, didn't tell my sponsor. And then from there, my parents wanted to move to Arizona. I came with them, and I quit AA for about 2 months. Just went out drinking, and life got worse than it had ever been. I'd managed to get a job here in Arizona, but 2 days before my sobriety date and 1 day before my sobriety date, I started drinking at work. And I just couldn't continue. It was like the fire was burning all around me, and I was about to lose my parents, where I was living. I was probably about to lose my job. I don't know how much longer I could have kept that up. And I bottomed out. I came into the rooms, the Welcome Valley group, where I met my current sponsor, and he pulled me aside after the meeting, said give him a call every day in the morning, read from the big book every day, and go to a meeting every day. And so that's what I did. And I was finally willing to listen, because when he said that he got down on his knees every morning and prayed and then did a morning meditation, that's the same exact thing that my first sponsor said. But I didn't listen at the time. For some reason, it didn't apply to me. But this time I was willing to try prayer, and things started to get better. And then I tried to make as honest as I could a 4-step with my current sponsor, and the 2 things that I had not included, I put at the top of the list. And when it came to looking at my defects, I asked God to remove them. And as I made a list of amends, I went over them with my sponsor and then began to make direct amends, especially to my former workplace, my parents, old friends that I'd hurt. And I started to clean up my wreckage. And from there, things really started to get good. I remember around the 9th step point, I realized that I didn't have the desire to drink anymore. And that was something that I couldn't picture in the beginning, because I wanted to drink when I first came in. And to say that, wow, things can get me down, but alcohol is no longer the solution. And I know that I can never go back to drinking. Now, I might take my will and go back and do it, but it's never an option that makes sense. That's insanity. And I'm so thankful that I'm here. I got involved in service work, thankfully. Started with just leading my home group meeting for a month, and then I got asked to be alternate GSR. I said yes without talking to my sponsor first, and I ended up becoming the GSR for the group. And I was a coffee maker for another group for a year, and I'm thankful for the people that suggested for me to do that or volunteered my name. It got me giving back, got me away from myself, got me doing something productive. And it's led to where my life is today, to where I can say that life is great and that I'm actually happy. All this time to where I would spend daydreaming while drinking, those goals and those feelings that I wanted to have started to come true. Everything from being able to go to sleep with a clean conscience, to restoring the relationship with old friends and with my parents who I'd scared to death. What's going on with their son? He can't stop drinking. He's lying about all this. We don't know where he is. To kind of give them some peace of mind after putting them through all of that. That reliance on my higher power and this program has given me the opportunity to do. And all those things that I've wanted to do, to have a career, to eat healthier, to start going to the gym. I remember for years I was like, I need to start going to the gym. I need to start going to the gym. I just never did it. I'd always have some excuse. Either I'm hungover or I'm drinking. I can't go. And now I can. There's things that I can do, and there's things that I can't do. But I work within the middle. And gosh, when it comes to going to all these fellowship events, just most recently went to Flagstaff Roundup. That was great. Been to several roundups before, but never a camping one, so we had a blast for 4 days. And I've been able to go to the shoestring roundup for the last 2 years. I'm really looking forward to this year. Been to Presky Paw and all kinds of events, picnics at Granite Creek Park, and just small stuff. I have a group that we go to breakfast after the meeting now and have a blast sober, to where I felt like I couldn't do anything with other people or anything at all without drinking. I was either too scared to go, or I was too bored, or whatever. I'd have some excuse for why it wasn't right. But I wanted to get to a point to where I could enjoy life on life's terms. And I think the most important thing of all is working through this program is I hope that it has allowed me to become a better person, and that I can continue building on that, helping other people, helping sponsees, and just continuing to make the world a better place. And thank you. Thank you, Mike.
Great job, Cole. Now, would you please give a big hand to Annelise? She's our next speaker.
Hi, I'm Annelise and I'm an alcoholic. I will start off, I don't know where Curtis went, but thank you for asking me to speak. My sobriety date is September 19th of 2020. I have a sponsor, I work with sponsees, I have 2 home groups. I try to stay in the middle of the herd, and I try to practice service because that's what keeps me here, it's what keeps me sober. I'll start off by qualifying. I'll tell you guys a little bit about myself. I'm from Washington State. I was born and raised in Washington State. Growing up, I had a difficult childhood, but that's not why I drank. But when I was a kid, I was in a lot of pain. My mom died when I was 3, and my dad was very absent. I went through some adversities as a kid, and I believe that I drank because I'm an alcoholic, but also when I first started drinking, I drank to numb the pain. all of my drinking, I had this deep sense, like I had this hole inside of me that had this hole inside of me, and I believed that I wasn't okay. I didn't know what to do. So I found my solution and I drank. I started drinking probably when I started drinking very young, probably when I was around 10 or 11 years old. I've been to a lot of treatment centers. I went to my first treatment center when I was 13 years old. I had my first drink when I was 11 or 12. I remember I snuck out of the house and I met up with a friend and he had alcohol and I drank it, and all of a sudden, like, my mind was just constantly going. I was constantly worried, I was afraid, I had all of these thoughts, and I drank, and I found a sense of okay that I'd been looking for my whole life because I never felt okay. And I just took off running. Like I said, I went to my first treatment center when I was 13 years old. They had me answer a couple questions and they told me that I was an alcoholic. At the age of 13, I was told for the first time that I was an alcoholic, and they recommended that I stay sober. I did not stay sober, and very quickly I faced consequences. In my early teens as well, I was involved in the court systems. I had regular court dates, I had court-ordered UAs. In my drinking, I faced a lot of different consequences. And those consequences did not get me sober. Unfortunately, I had to go through a lot of things to reach a point of willingness, but I believe that it makes me an alcoholic, that I faced consequence after consequence and none of it mattered because I didn't want to lose my solution, and my solution was alcohol. Throughout high school, after I went to treatment for the first time, I stayed sober for a little bit. I stayed sober because I was scared. I didn't like going to treatment. I didn't want to go back. So I stayed sober for about a year. And at the end of my freshman year of high school, I drank again, and it was just immediately back off. Other substances are also a part of my story, but I'll just leave it at that. But very quickly, in high school, I put myself in really, really dangerous situations. I put myself in situations where I was assaulted multiple times. I put myself in situations where I had a gun to my head. But none of that made me stop. None of that made me question. I just used it as an excuse to keep drinking. I drank through high school. I did not have a high school graduation. I was not set to graduate high school. I bounced around from school to school. Halfway through my senior year of high school, my dad kicked me out. I wouldn't stay sober, and I hurt my parents really, really badly to the point where they asked me to leave their home and not come back. So I just started bouncing around. I went to live with my aunt in Seattle, Washington, and the same thing happened there, where I was introduced to AA for the first time in 2019. And one of the conditions that my aunt had for me to live with her was to stay sober, and I couldn't do that, so I was asked not to stay there either. I came back one day when I was out partying, I was out drinking, and I came back, and there's a bag of my stuff sitting on her doorstep, and she would not let me go back in the house. So at that time, it was the end of my senior year, 17 years old, nowhere to go. None of my family would have me, disowned by most of my family. They wouldn't talk to me. I bounced around from place to place for a little bit until I burned the bridges with my friends as well. And I went back to treatment, and I tried to get sober again. I tried to get sober. I had a sponsor. I'd gone to a couple meetings. I'd been bouncing in and out of treatment from place to place for years. But I hadn't hit my bottom, and I wasn't totally willing yet. So I got out of that treatment center, and I went into a sober living. And I wasn't ready. I wasn't willing. So I relapsed once again, and that relapse led me to a 3-day coma in the ICU right after my 18th birthday. And thank God that's my sobriety date. And I don't know. I'm glad that I finally found a solution. It took me a couple months into my sobriety to be willing to change, because in my opinion there's a big difference between being sober or being dry and being in recovery. And for my first several months I was a dry alcoholic I had no recovery in my life. I wasn't working a program, and it took some extra pushes for me to really get willing and get ready. I've had to experience a lot of misery to get me to the point where I am today, but I wouldn't change any of it for the world. So I got sober, and I'll talk a little bit about what my experience in sobriety has been like. I got sober, I got a sponsor, and I started working the steps. I wasn't super excited about it. I started working the steps because I was in treatment and I wanted to get my phone back. But that was what it took. It took a little extra push. At first I started putting in the work because other people wanted it for me. I was in treatment because it was either being in treatment in Arizona or being homeless in Arizona. And I liked having food and a bed. So I stayed in treatment, not because I wanted to, but somewhere along the line, I had a realization, I had a type of spiritual awakening where I realized that I deserve better than the life I've lived before. And I found a power greater than myself, and I found purpose in that. So I'm still in treatment, and I've had multiple step one experiences in sobriety. I've had multiple moments in my sobriety where I hit a point where I have to become entirely willing once again. I think my first step one experience was coming out of that coma and realizing, like, I tried to get sober. I've tried to get sober before. I don't know what happened. I don't know why I'm here. I shouldn't be alive right now, but for some reason I am. For some reason I'm alive, and there has to be a reason for that. I just don't know what it is quite yet. But my first step experience came after multiple relapses and seeing I'm powerless. There's nothing that I can do here. My way does not work. And it's not only that I'm powerless over alcohol, it's that I'm powerless over every aspect of my life. I don't have any control over alcohol. I don't have any control over other substances. I don't have control over the actions of other people in my life. I work with a higher power to try to improve my actions, and that's all that I can do. But basically, I'm powerless over everything, and my life is incredibly unmanageable. In step 2 and 3, I came to believe that there was a power greater than myself and that I could be restored to sanity. And then I turned my will and my life over to that power. I was super intimidated by these steps at first. I lived in the delusion for so long that I could manage my own life. But looking back, looking at the facts, that was not something that I was ever able to do. I wasn't able to manage. I lived in a delusion that maybe I could manage, but I never could. So looking at that, just looking at my way does not work. I have to try something else. So at first my higher power was, I shouldn't be alive right now, but for some reason I am, and there's some purpose and there's something that's looking out for me. And my higher power has changed over the years. For a minute, it was the rooms, it was the other people in the rooms of AA. My mindset was that I didn't completely understand what was going on here, but I had proof that something was working, and I wanted what y'all had, so I kept coming back. In step 4, doing a searching and fearless moral inventory, this was, it was really, really hard for me. In step 4 and 5, I was absolutely terrified. I drank because I was so afraid of what would happen if people saw the real me. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to be heard. I wanted to hide and I wanted to feel okay. And it's ironic because the only time that I wasn't able to find that sense of being okay or being happy or being loved until I worked the steps, and I was looking for it in all of the wrong places. But in step 4 and 5, I had another spiritual awakening when I wrote down all the things that I had been hiding my whole life, all the things that I was ashamed of, all the things that I didn't want people to know about me, because I couldn't let you see the real me. But I did, and I read them out loud, and the worst things that I've done, things that I swore I would never say out loud, I said it out loud to another woman, and she looked at me and she said, "Me too, and I still love you." And that was such a beautiful experience, getting to be loved no matter what. The people in AA loved me until I could love myself. And now it's a gift that I get to give that back. In step 6 and 7, looking at my defects of character and asking for them to be removed. I'm a human being full of defects of character. Even with over 2.5 years sober, I still have many, many defects that I have to actively try to recognize and work through. A lot of it, so I recognize these defects and I pray for them to be removed. All of my defects come from a place of, at one point, I believe that they were beneficial to me. I'm selfish because I'm scared of what will happen if I don't have enough. I'm resentful because I don't want you to see that I'm actually really hurt and scared. All of my defects come from a place protecting myself, but I don't need them anymore. So in step 6 and 7, I asked for them to be removed and I asked for a different solution. In steps 8 and 9, I got to really look at myself and I got to make amends for the harm that I've done. And I got to repair bonds that I wasn't sure that I would ever repair, through living amended and through eventually making direct amends to my family in Washington after being asked not to invite family events for 3 years. I was not invited to Thanksgiving. I was not asked to attend. This last Thanksgiving, my grandparents paid for a plane ticket for me to fly up and spend Thanksgiving with them because they saw that I was living a different way and they wanted me back in their life. And I've just had so many beautiful experiences with getting to show up differently and getting to be someone that I'm proud of and getting to be the woman that I believe God wants me to be today. In step 10, this is throughout the day, spot check inventories, continuing to take that personal moral inventory and admitting when I'm wrong. Because like I said, I'm still a flawed person, but I'm striving to be better every day and I have to work on becoming more aware. In step 11, searching to improve my conscious contact with a higher power. I'm trying to speed up, but I love the words. I think one of the most important words in that step is the sought, and that this is always going to be a process of seeking. I don't expect to ever find or ever be healed, or I'm never going to be cured of alcoholism, but today I can see that as a blessing, that I have alcoholism, that I have a fellowship around me. And like I said, I wouldn't trade that for the world, but in step 11, I continue to seek to grow and improve my spiritual life. And then in step 12, I get to turn around and I get to give it all away. Because that's the purpose of being in AA, and the purpose of getting sober is that I now get to reach out my hand to other alcoholics and practice the principles in all of my affairs. My life is beautiful today. I never would have thought that I would be where I am. I got sober at 18 years old. I've never had a legal drink. I'm turning 21 in about a week and a half. But I think it's so cool. My life is so beautiful. I have an amazing fellowship. I have amazing people around me. I am an employable human being where I'm looked up to. I get to set an example. I get to be a totally different person than I was before. I'm so grateful for my life. I have my family back. I'm going to school. I have a life beyond my wildest imagination, and I couldn't have done it without you guys or the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Wow, what a good talk. 2 great talks. You guys are very inspiring. Now, for our last speaker, please help me introduce Rickey. Welcome.
Hi guys, I'm Rickey. I'm an alcoholic. Sorry, Patrick, I lied to you when you asked me if I was here to speak. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate you guys asking me to be here, Curtis especially. I don't know if you guys got the same treatment, Cole and Annelise, but Curtis gave me the call and asked me if I'd come to speak at this meeting, and immediately my head was like, no. But what do? We say yes when asked for anything in AA. And then a couple days go by, and Curtis texts me, he goes, hey, we're going to have to push you back. We have Bob D coming for the end of May. And so I got pushed back, and more time to sit there and try not to think about tonight. So, I had to say a quick prayer before coming up here, just to try and, get out of the way and be a conduit, right, for the message. Because that's all that I'm really here for. I would not be here speaking in front of you guys by choice, right? But anyways, my sobriety date is October 21st, 2014. And if you're looking at me and kind of wondering how old I am, yes, I was basically a child when I got here. Same thing as Annelise, well, not 18, but I was 20 years old. I've not had a legal drink as of today. And honestly, that's not a whole lot by my doing. I think some experiences through my lifetime, leading up to that, kind of brought it about. There's nothing special about me or anything. I don't know if really I was born with this thing, if it's genetic or if it's, developed over time, but alcoholism is present in my family. My dad, I never knew what he looked like sober. I never learned that until the last couple of years. My brother, older brother, the only sibling I've had, living definition or living example of the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde character. And, early on, so seeing all that, I did not want to be like them. I thought they were pretty horrible people, to be honest. And I set out to be everything opposite as them, right? But at some point, I was invited to take a drink. I was around 11 years old. And immediately I was trying to control it. But I did get that sense of ease and comfort. Like I could suddenly breathe. I finally felt a little more comfortable in my skin. Like I wasn't so separate from everybody. I didn't feel that anxious apartness that the 12 and 12 talks about. Just for that glimpse, that brief moment. And it was pretty cool, But I was still scared. I was terrified of being like my brother. I was terrified of being like my dad. And so for the next few years, I continued to seek that experience where it's just that right amount where I didn't get crazy like them, but I was able to enjoy myself. And as time goes on, I did what we do, and I started thinking, maybe I'm making too big of a deal out of this. And the next chance I got, I go to this party, a bunch of older kids. I was 15 or 16, I think. And I was at this house. It was notorious, right off the golf course. And it's always, beer pong, this and that, just crazy parties. And I show up, and there's this dude named Kephart babysitting this big old bottle of whiskey. And I was like, that's my guy. So I went after him, and he's like, hey, man, what's up? You want to take a shot? And I was like, yep. Gave me a shot. He's like, you want another one? I was like, yep. And I don't know how many, I don't know what that, how far that went, but that was the greatest night of my life. I woke up the next day, and all of a sudden, all my buddies, they were like, telling me about everything I was doing the night before. Turns out I got a little too friendly with the girl who became my sister-in-law in the future. Weird story, but I'm not going to go too in-depth on that one. But anyways, speaking of that, they decided to play a prank on me. And it was a good, friendly little prank. It wasn't anything crazy, but they tried to pretend like her boyfriend on like a new phone number line, right? And like it was like, playing this prank, and all of a sudden I'm like, I just felt like a part of, I was still feeling it from the night before, and I felt like I was finally a part of. And first blackout, first feeling of really just being like, I let go entirely, and you guys welcomed me, and that was my shit, sorry for the language, but yeah, I was 15 or 16, and next thing you know, I'm seeking that as often as I could. I started finding it in other forms, like pills and baggies and whatnot, and before I knew it, I was way worse than my brother, than my dad, than anybody else in the family. I just turned 20, and I had no more friends. My family was trying to have me locked up. I was shuffling between couches and tweaker pads, and I was ready to die. I was ready to crawl off into the ditch and just, wait for the bitter end, because I was too scared to kill myself, And the bright idea came to me that instead of, waiting for jail or waiting for suicide, I was like, well, why don't I try to go to rehab? Sounds a lot nicer, honestly. So I find myself in a facility down in Phoenix, and it's an inpatient facility, and I get introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous in this place. And I didn't quite understand what was going on. I looked up at the steps, and it all kind of made sense, spirituality, that's going to be the thing, Christ, God, Buddha, all the stuff, anything. I was like, it makes sense. And I started going through the motions. I didn't want to go to jail. I didn't want to kill myself. And I was getting a little comfortable. And I got some time. It was like a few months. And before I knew it, I got loaded. I couldn't understand why. All the people around me were like, well, you probably left something out on your four-step. I'm like, no, I went back and, because I did. I went back and I shared it with my sponsor. And I don't know, I tried it again. Made it about 2 weeks, slipped again. And next thing you know, I'm trying one more time. And I'm literally living out like the combination of Fred and Jim's story and more about alcoholism. And I get to about 28 days, and I get loaded again. And it's like the very last thing that I wanted to do. Like I was trying to tell myself no, don't do this. But as soon as the opportunity came, the obsession overweighed everything else that was in my head, And really, at the end of the day, it was the idea that I was 20 years old. I came in here, I was listening to people, and I was separating myself, I was, everyone would be like, well, don't compare your insides to their outsides. I'm like, what the hell does that mean, And I don't know. I was sitting there, I was just counting all the things, subconsciously counting all the things that kept me separate from you guys, that made me different, And one of the biggest things was like, well, I'm only 20, this and that, and I don't know. There's this experience, though, where I came around this last time, I woke up, or I came to, I honestly don't even know what was going on, but I was in my truck outside of this meeting hall in Chandler, and it was like 6 a.m. They had this meeting every day where it was like hundreds of years of sobriety, People were rolling up, and I woke up, and I decided to go inside, grab a cup of coffee, and sit down. And I picked up another 24-hour chip. My grant sponsor stopped me on my way back to my seat, and he asked me, like, when are you going to get this, kid? And he said it just like that. He wasn't, like, mean about it. He just, he wanted to know. And I was like, dude, I don't know, And I think that's like step one for me. You know what I mean? I don't, it's nothing I can make sense of. The more I try to think about it and be like, whoa, yeah, like the allergy, the obsession, like it makes sense, like that stuff. Like I have those experiences in my story. But at the end of the day, it's like, this thing is broken. And I can't rely on it to get out of this situation. And I realized that, I came to the realization that of myself, I was basically nothing as far as alcohol and drugs went. And I hope that, you guys who introduced yourself as new, or anybody who might be, suffering a little bit from this anxious apartness and being separate from, I hope that, you heard something tonight that you can identify with and not, separate from, But anyways, like I was saying, I got here and I was, ready to die. I wasn't sure if I was going to get this thing because I'd had so many slips, I didn't have any faith in myself, and I wasn't quite sure about this whole God business. But I looked around, and I saw you guys. You guys seemed to really be enjoying life. You guys thought like I did, talked like I did, and had stories like I did. And, I thought, well, if it worked for you, then maybe it'll work for me. And all the things that, you guys were suggesting, I finally took seriously. Whenever you guys said to do something, I said, okay, Kind of like, coming here tonight. It's like, fuck, I don't want to be here, I don't want to share myself with you guys. Like, that's embarrassing, but, it brings me closer to you. And at the end of the day, that's how my God has grown. Sounds weird saying that. I don't normally say my God, sorry. But, it's the experience of going through something that I don't want to do, I end up experiencing God through that. And the more that I do the things that, and kind of give myself and abandon myself to this program, the bigger my life has gotten. And, I don't know. It's pretty wild. I got to say, being 20 years old when I got here, I kind of developed this problem with Alcoholics Anonymous where there was a lot of older folks who seemed to, sorry, I'm not looking at you specifically. I saw your face. There was a lot of older folks, right? And they all seemed to be settled, right? They had their career, they had their family, they had this and that. I didn't have any of that. I had a bag of clothes and a car, So I, a couple of years in, I started seeking bigger things out of life, I started seeking education, started going to school. I started looking for, a better career path. Started looking for, the one, the relationship, started going to the gym and this and that. And I got pretty distracted for a while. And I'm kind of in the midst, in this past year, fighting through all the crap that I've built up over this time, coming back in and being here with you guys and working these steps. And I'm coming to some pretty wild realizations. And I'm extremely grateful for it, because at the end of the day, there's things that I'm still learning, things that I'm kind of relearning too. But within the last year, I got to spend Thanksgiving with my in-laws and my parents together, and they couldn't be two total opposites of like kind of family, like alcoholism and like totally normal people. Like it was very weird. But you know, my dad was sober for Thanksgiving Day, and there was a moment where we were all sitting around the table, and you know, just the chit chat. You know, everyone was talking, kind of about nothing really, to be honest. And you know, my dad kind of cuts through all of it, and he looks at me and he says, "You know, how's life going, kid?" And I was floored. You know, it's the first time that fool has ever. I say fool as it's a term of endearment, by the way. That's the first time, you know, he's ever looked at me like that and asked, you know, genuinely how I'm doing. And the only reason that's available to me is because I've, you know, gone through the inventory. I've made the amends. And I continually try to like improve that relationship, you know. And the crazy thing is my brother, over the winter, this past winter, he hits me up and says he needs help. He's like, "Can you know, show me the way?" And I was like, "Well, I don't, you know, he's a few hours away." And I told him what I could, you know, what we do. I was like, pray, you know, go to a meeting, find some people in your area, right? And that's the cool thing about this thing is like, you know, I get to get out of myself and be of service, like at meetings and meet with guys who are trying to get this thing as well, but like trying to practice the principles in my life. And somehow, like, I don't know when it's going to happen, but living the example so that maybe somebody else can find this thing. Because not everybody has that luxury of like going to a rehab and just being introduced comfortably to Alcoholics Anonymous, you know. I've been like extremely blessed with like the experience that I've had. Like it's so easy, you know. It seems hard. It really does, but it's actually super easy. But like I was saying, just being an example. That's what my old sponsor used to say. Every day I'd call him. At the end of the call, he'd be just, you know, be the example, son. And that's ultimately what I try to do is just, you know, be a conduit, like I said at the beginning. Carry the message, you know. I'm on borrowed time. I really don't believe, I didn't believe that I should be here. But obviously there's something that like I had to offer. I don't know what the hell it is, but other than, you know, obviously this gift that we have, right? But yeah, thank you guys for having me. I think I'll just pass with that.
Ryan, would you please lead our speakers to the rear entrance so everybody can thank them personally, and please do thank the speakers before you leave. Let's give our speakers another great hand. Curtis, thanks for getting us a good lineup tonight. We record our speakers, and if you'd like to go to YouTube if you'd like to go to Rarely Group on YouTube, you can find tonight's speakers and all past speakers. If you have trouble finding the site, see Bobby. He's standing back there with his hand up. He's the sunburnt one, so when you go past him, pat him on the back. Would everyone please pick up any trash that you have left so we leave this room as clean as when we found it. And let me make sure I've not forgotten anything. Thanks, Mark and Teresa, for reading. And Michelle for filling in on chips. Now, because of the configuration of the room, if everybody would just stand in place and we will say the Lord's Prayer.